So my name is Leanne Shapton. I think I'm up here with Buzz because I wrote a book about swimming and my history of being a competitive swimmer. And in the middle of the book, I had about half of my collection of swimsuits, which was 25 different swimsuits, and I talked about where they were from, but also about the body. And Buzz, do you want to talk about sports?
I want to preface this by saying this is a very weird-ass panel, so I'm not sure.
Panel too.
We'll have fun. I'm not sure what it has anything to do with, but in any case, I'm Buzz Bissinger. I've written several nonfiction books. I was a contributing editor at Vanity Fair. I guess the book that I'm best known for was a book called Friday Night Lights about the impact of sports in high school football in Texas. Well, thank you. Thank you. As a matter of fact, we can stop right there. Any questions?
Yeah.
No? Well, let's go. Does anyone have any booze, by the way?
No,
I'm
we
serious.
need a couple of shots.
We were talking that we would like a few shots.
I was serious.
I am up here, I guess, because I have written about fashion. I do love fashion. I've even thought about sports uniforms very briefly. But go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things throughout this weekend, I noticed that there was a lot of talk about beauty and style and the nonverbal discipline of sport, and how sports writers, struggle to kind of to talk about something that is visual and physical. And I think this is where maybe there's this overlap between how we look at beauty in sport, and there's also sort of how we look at design and clothing and signifiers, codes, uniforms. Both disciplines have been described as pointless and meaningless. However, we know that both inspire also a lot of passion and can also make a lot of money. So I love Buzz's writing when he writes both about sports. Friday Night Lights is an incredible piece of literature that just has reached so many people, but also as a story has sort of gone into film and television. But I've also loved his writing about sexuality, about clothing, about compulsion, and questioning oneself and one's identity. And I think that's something that maybe post-sports a lot of athletes are confronted with, but also just everybody is confronted with versions of themselves and the truth about versions of themselves. And one thing that I'm so excited to talk to Buzz about is sort of how this comes out and how we talk about more difficult things, and how shame works in terms of both clothing and conventions. I mean, sports is it just has a lot of conventions and.
Well, sports does. I mean, I have looked at uniforms. I'm trying to glean some metaphysical, existential point. I mean, there aren't any. Uniforms are uniforms. There have been changes over the years, but they look like they look. I mean, some have been completely patently ridiculous. The Chicago White Sox playing one game wearing shorts, which didn't work very well. Are uniforms sexy, which is something about fashion that appeals to me? I don't think so, although I think, football players are sexy. They have great butts.
That corsetry in the back of them.
Yeah, and the uniforms have changed. If you look at old-time football players in the 1940s, they're pretty dowdy, but now it's all gladiatorial. It's all very, very streamlined. It's all very, very tight. There are sort of the more Ralph Lauren traditional uniforms that do make a difference, that do exude and symbolize history, classiness, like the New York Yankees, like the pinstripes. That does, in a sense, I think, stand for the best of New York, or the Boston Red Sox, or the St. Louis Cardinals. But I don't think you're going to find a lot of fashion in sports. The one element that I like the best is the opening series of the Olympics and the closing ceremony. because the creativity of what they wear in their uniforms, I think, is marvelous, and I love to see, what the French are wearing, what the Italians are wearing, what the Africans are wearing, what the South Americans are wearing, and what the Americans are wearing. And, I get off on that. I mean, the rest of the shit I don't really care about. But we all do wear, and this isn't right, I mean, we wear a uniform. In sports, there's certain expectations of what uniform you have to wear. I mean, it's very, very, required. There are a lot of rules. But we do wear a uniform, I think, in our lives. And to vary at all from that uniform, what's expected of you, whoever you are, is tricky. I'm sure some people here look at me and say, Jesus, what the fuck is with that guy? I mean, he's wearing the cowboy boots and the rings, and I will tell you, this is what I wear. And it took me a long time to break from the classic
When was the first
uniform.
time you did to go from khakis and, the...
I should preface, because I'm actually too open about myself. I have a leather fetish. I mean, it's a legitimate leather fetish. I've had it since I was 5. I tried to repress it I didn't wear a piece of leather until I was 45 years old. I just didn't. I, grew up with Brooks Brothers and khaki pants that were very baggy because my mother wanted to get 2 years' use out of them. But this fetish was there, and finally, at the age of almost 45 or 50, I decided I had to discover it. In discovering that I had a leather fetish, I also developed a true and terrible shopping addiction.
But tell us the moment of when at 45 when you realized you reacted to
Well, it's like most things in life. I was going through a divorce, and so But I was going through a divorce, and I was tired of fighting myself. I was tired of wearing a uniform, bow ties, button-down shirts, the way a journalist is supposed to look, a little bit scruffy, a little bit this, a little bit that. And I was tired of fighting who I was, because we do identify ourselves through clothing. That is why it is so powerful. That is why can be so alluring. So at that age...
Protective.
Yeah, I mean, we protect our identity, or we assert our identity, and so at the age of 45, roughly, I said, all right, that's it. I want to explore it, and I have to say that I was helped. I wrote the Vanity Fair piece on Caitlyn Jenner when Caitlyn Jenner announced that she was Caitlyn Jenner, and I spent a lot of time with her. And I do remember her saying that I want to explore myself and see who I really am before I die. And that resonated with me. I mean, I was sort of starting on this journey, and it goes up and it goes down, but I wanted to identify with myself, whether it's in terms of clothing, whether in terms of sexuality, whether it's in terms of sexual desire, before I die. It was complex. Father, I have a wonderful wife. Things got very, very complicated, but I felt committed to pursue that, and also not to be influenced by others. By others. I will say, because of my style of dress, and I'm not wearing a lot of leather. I hate hot weather because I can't wear a lot of leather, actually. I get a lot of compliments from women. I get great compliments from minorities, and white heterosexual males are worthless. I mean, they really are.
Do you think
worthless? They are. They're worthless. They're so repressed. They're so nervous about any leakage of flair or maybe homoeroticism. They're all really, really uptight. So I purposely love staring at them as they're staring at me.
Do you think, though, in this recognition that white heterosexual males, of which you could have been identified in your khakis and your Brooks Brothers before, do you think that they are also repressing something? And I mean, when you get divorced, you just find this whole community.
I mean, I think we're all repressing something.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we all have some secret of another. I think it's natural, of something we want to be, but there's a lot of taboo associated with it. There's a lot of that's not me. Friends I have are not going to understand. Parents are not going to understand, and I don't want to make it too extreme. But at the beginning, I was, when I would wear full leather and leather gloves and things that I love. I was self-conscious. I was really, really self-conscious. Did I look silly? Were people mocking me? I'm sure some were. Were people laughing? Were people doing this? Were people doing that? I try to carry it off with a sense of style, but, ultimately, fuck it. Why am I living for other people? And who exactly am I hurting?
Well,
I'm not hurting anybody, and it's an expression. And for a writer, you have to express your creativity. A lot of the reason that I dress the way I do is because I need stimulation of one sort or another. And I will tell you this, there's no question that clothing and the uniform that I wear has some sexual stimulation. It gets me going, and I need to get going when I write, because it's hard enough to write when you're excited, but if you're flat, at least for me, because I try to write with a sense of visceral, emotional, that's what I'm good at. And if I'm flat, forget it. It's not going to happen.
You bring up two things. Look what we got. Both. Cheers.
Oh, we got some booze. All right.
Thanks.
Now we're going to have some fun. All right, I'll be doing a striptease fairly soon,
Okay.
and then you'll all leave. That'll be good.
You bring up two things that I want to bring up.
That's so good.
There's one thing is white male heterosexuality has come under a lot of scrutiny, and I love your thing in wearing leather, in getting in touch with this. You're not hurting anybody. However, a lot of white male heterosexuals have hurt people.
Yes, they have.
And there's a reckoning. And I kind of want to say, if these men who clearly, have expressed inappropriate sexual advances in the workplace here and there, if they were more in touch with their sexuality, like nothing's come out in terms of, very little's come out in terms of the Me Too issue about sadism, masochism, dominance, and these are all things that I think we could be talking about, because, had these men felt a certain pride about, I like to pull hair, or I like to be spanked, or I like to just more of a conversation around this stuff, there might be less violence and less pain around it, and unintentional pain around it.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
any sexual expression between two people must be consensual. I mean, that's obvious. That's stupid. It must be consensual. But people do express themselves. What we don't talk about is sex can be expressed in a lot of different ways. We all have different definitions of what we get off on. We have different definitions of what romantic is. We have different definitions of what's exciting, what's not exciting. It comes and it ebbs and flows, and it's been in an ebb. I've had a lifelong both fascination and more than fascination with sadomasochism, with BDSM, and I won't go into the psychology of that, but I know why it exists. I know why leather gloves became iconic in my life and became a symbol of dominance, both through my mother and through my teacher in kindergarten who wore leather gloves, and it became a symbol of power, and that
I need a visual
stayed
image
with
of that, the kindergarten teacher in leather gloves. Were they black
Well,
leather gloves?
she thought I was retarded. I mean, she did. And I was terrified. I was very scared as a kid. I was scared of expressing myself. I was nervous. I was terrified. She didn't really like me. At least that's the sense that I got. And, I'm very open, too open. But I do vividly remember at the end of class, she would pull on leather gloves. And she became clearly a very, very dominant figure to me. And my mother was the same way. I mean, she would wear leather gloves in the summer. And obviously there was something about that: power, fear, submission. Let's face it, submission. I've tried dominance. I didn't really like it. And, my fantasies and I have acted out, and I've done this, has been as a submissive. But I can see that happening. When I was 5, those gloves became a symbol of their power, both taboo, wanting to please, my own desires. And then it gets very complicated from there. But that was from the age of 5, and I repressed it, put on khaki pants and Brooks Brothers and the whole bit.
Before your encounter with leather at 45, had you put on women's clothes or put on
I had
when you were a teenager?
I very briefly as a teenager, there was a good friend in college who, for some reason, she gave me a pair of leather boots to take to her house or her parents' house, and I remember putting them on. and I remember getting very excited. But I do mildly cross-dress because it's fun. It's fun. I mean, I feel, I think the term is autogynephilia. I do feel a sexual charge from clothing, tight clothing. I love thigh-high boots. I love boots. I love wearing fishnets. I don't wear a dress because, I look silly. If I didn't look silly, I probably would. I love makeup. This is bad because I'm like the macho writer of Friday Night Lights.
It makes you even more macho, in my opinion.
I'm Mr. High School
fantastic.
Football, and I'm confessing all this stuff that I love. I love skincare. I actually wrote a column on skincare for the New York magazine, The Strategist. But it is fun, and it excites me, and I like buying certain women's clothing, and I don't know what's the problem. Why is it stratified? Why is there a women's section? Why is there a men's section? Why are people look at me askance when I say, I love makeup. There's certain times I love wearing blush. Certain times I love wearing lipstick.
Because not enough people are saying it and admitting it is why.
No,
I mean,
I made the mistake. It was very, very complicated. You can find out more about me. I'm just going to tell you this is very complicated feelings about it. There was a documentary made about my appetites on HBO that came out recently. But also the downside of those appetites and really acting out and leaving my wife, who was marvelous, to discover myself and then sort of writing myself. She was very, very supportive, but at that time it wasn't enough. I really wanted to go into the deep end of BDSM and submission. I wanted to see what it was really like. And I got to tell you, there's a lot to like, and there's a lot that I just don't like. But it was exciting. I don't do much of it now. I just am feeling sort of, I guess, older and not necessarily as sexy. But
and your wife you're still together.
we as a result of the documentary, and I'll go into it, I hurt her terribly. She's an amazing, beautiful woman. I hurt her terribly because I strayed, we left, I separated, I had a mistress. And seeing that documentary, don't see it for me, see it for her. She's a magnificent, gorgeous, beautiful, articulate.
The documentary is really interesting because it doesn't necessarily, because it's complicated, because this terrain is relatively new, especially, I love that Bissinger as this macho is also, has no shame in sort of talking about all of this. It's so important.
Yeah, and to tie it back to sports and athletics, how many very few athletes ever talk about sexuality or sexual desire or one of the
Yeah.
I've been in professional baseball locker rooms, and those guys, they're nude, they love each other, they're very, very comfortable with whatever current is going through them. Whether it's homoeroticism, which I don't know if it is or isn't, it's beautiful to watch. They all have great butts. They're not self-conscious. It's interesting about sports for men. It's virtually sports and war are the only two places where men are allowed to openly love. I'm convinced of that, where they can express affection and kisses and hugs and tears and joy for one another. But otherwise, there's occasional expression. Someone will come out and say, well, I'm actually gay, but the fear of that and the fear of being stigmatized is less than what it was, but still terrifying to many athletes. They are convinced with some reason that they will be rejected or tittered about or laughed about, and that fans behind closed doors will say, that guy's gay, for God's sakes. So it still is definitely a taboo.
What does it take to have the courage to get over that and come out and admit, and because you do find supportive communities, no matter whether it's leaving a marriage or whether it's leaving a sexuality or.
I think I felt at a certain point, and I sort of hate to say this because this can be overdone, but I felt that maybe I was trying to convey a message to people and actually here I'm a journalist, right? All I do is ask people to tell the truth. Reveal yourself. Tell the truth. Reveal to me your darkest secrets. Give me your introspection. Give me your moments of embarrassment. Give me your fears. Give me your joys. Give me your jealousies. I want to probe deep, 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 deep. And then I'm the one who decides what to use and what not to use. But I'm preaching, tell the truth, tell the truth, tell the truth. And I felt, you know what, that applies to me. And it applies to me in an area that we never, ever really want to talk about, which is sex, which is desire, which is appetite. We cloak ourselves in repression. We cloak ourselves, I think, in dishonesty. We sublimate. We don't want to accept. And I felt, hey, you know what? What does it do? And if I talk about this, what assumptions do you make of me, which may be right or may be wrong? Is that guy really a father? Well, I am a father. I have 3 great kids. I am married. Now, maybe I certainly have a gender dysphoria. There's no question about it. But these things, I think, should be discussed because it raises, and I don't want to get too carried away, but what is gender? What does it really mean? What does it really mean to be male if you're excluded from certain things that you may enjoy doing? What does it mean to be really female? Why do you have to go into the department store and there's a male section and there's a female section, which instantly, to some degree, stigmatizes you? You know, I'd like to try on those pair of boots with a 4-inch heel. Well, you know, they go through the motions, but they're looking at you like you're fucking crazy.
On the other side of it, I mean, I just, you know, for winter, I bought my daughter, she needed a new parka, and I'm sorry, but the boys section, those parkas are so much better well-designed than girls' pink parkas with shitty filling. And but I was thinking, actually, in terms of bringing it back to sports, to say, you know, there's the wide world of sports, there's all these events, but you could sort of say, okay, the wide world of sex, and like, are you a sprinter? Are you a vaulter? Are you a team player?
Well, I mean, it's swimming. I mean, frankly.
But let's talk about it.
In competitive
everyone
swimming.
Everyone has their event.
How many in Olympic swimming, now be honest, wish they would just swim naked?
Oh,
because they're pretty close to naked.
They'd go slower. They'd go slower.
Or just a little thong. I mean, they have such great bodies, both the men and the women. They would go faster. I mean, why not go for it? And ironically, when I think of sports figures who I think have exuded sex, the one that does come to mind, the one that I vividly remember was Bruce Jenner in 1976. He was perfect. He was the perfect athletic specimen, which certainly led to joys in his life and then certain sorrows because of the image that he had. You know, he was, to me, the modern-day version of the perfect Greek sculpted.
But look at how much he was concealing and repressing.
Yeah, exactly. And look how much he was concealing and repressing, and had to live to had to conform to the image that we had of him that I'm exactly expressing.
Now we're not reading between the lines, we're reading outside the lines.
Right.
This is this part of the, but yeah, I know. I mean, I really am interested in what, in the, you know, we're talking courage, bravery, pain, kind of all this stuff about the noble athlete, but really, it, you know, in every other arena of life, the courage to be yourself and to come out and to sort of admit what you like and what you don't like. I mean, as much as men, I think in this era of inappropriate, you know, workplace stuff, and as much as I want men to be able to say what they like and don't like, I want women to be able to say what they like and don't like too. You know, whether, I don't know, I just feel there's been so, like, who's the person to write? I want you to write about it. I want you to write about sort of.
Oh no, I've retired from this shit. I've gotten too much grief for it.
No,
I mean,
you're not.
I mean, look.
This isn't grief, this is good, it's healthy.
You know, the piece that sort of got this going is I wrote a piece for GQ magazine. It was a weird time in my life, but I wrote about my leather fetish. I wrote about my shopping addiction, which I have for all sorts of reasons. I wrote about my particular addiction to Gucci. I mean, it's amazing, actually. I spent $600,000 on leather in about 3 years. It went beyond clothing and fashion at that
Think
point.
about what people spend on sports betting. I mean, it's.
Yeah. Well.
But I want to talk to you about, because again, if you've read Buzz's journalism and sports writing, his attention to nuance, his attention to design, his attention to detail is evident. But you know, you talk about, and I have this thing too, where I love white trousers. I love gray track pants.
You collect don't you collect white trousers?
And so this idea of collection, this like, what do you look for? What's the leather jacket for you? Like, what is the
Well, the problem was I was just buying with such compulsion, and I was buying, I just wanted the packages. I just wanted the thrill, really a sexual thrill. I would open them, I would look them, I would try them on, and the problem is, like any addiction, whether it was a day later or 2 days later or a week later or an hour later, they completely had lost that power. And so you try to fill it again, you try to fill it again, you try to fill it again. Vintage Versace is incredible. I mean, the cut of the leather, the sex of the leather is absolutely, sublime. Gucci is a little bit different. They've certainly gone in a different direction with Alessandro Michele. It's much more quirky. It's much more fun. But, Tom Ford leather just kicks ass. I mean, it just kicks ass, and it makes me feel divine, and I look pretty good in it. You don't want to feel, silly in it. That's the worst, and I don't anymore. But I will see. When you have 200 leather jackets, it's kind of hard to. You figure you have everything. I really like Philippe Plein. I don't know how many know who it is. He's really trashy. He's kind of Euro trashy. But it's really tight. The women's leather jackets, I think, are really, really cool. I don't buy as much of it. But what was interesting about this GQ piece, which is very, very confessional, was because I wrote Friday Night Lights, because I was considered to be a writer of sort of a male macho writing about a macho sport, I really got ridiculed. I really did get ridiculed.
Wasn't that an equal? Didn't you get praise and love in equal proportion?
Yeah, I did because I met immediately. I immediately after the GQ story, I went to rehab. It was a mess. I was doing harm to myself. I hated myself. I frankly wrote the piece in part because I wanted to destroy my relationship to my children. I didn't tell them about it. My son found out. He was a Kenyan, and a friend came up and said, your dad's gone off the deep end. And he was shocked, mortified, and angry for not many years, but 1 or 2 years, and I knew that would be the result. So I've actually never really looked at the national publicity. I've seen bits and pieces. My wife said a lot of it was horrendous. What's with this guy? He's he's committing suicide of a sense. Why is he admitting to this? Is he making this up? Is it a need for attention? Right down the line. And of course, it's Buzz Bissinger, author of Friday Night Lights. Buzz Bissinger, author of a seminal book about high school football in Texas. That was a very, very difficult, period of my life. Once I went into rehab for, among other things, sexual addiction, but burning myself and all sorts of serious things, then they realize, this actually is real. I mean, this is not some, shopping addiction for the hell of it. There are many, many deep-seated things going on, and rehab helped, to a certain degree. You get out of the glow of rehab, and you promise to, meditate 1 hour a day, and you're going to do yoga 1 hour a day, and that lasts for a couple weeks, and then maybe a couple months, and then afterwards you're back to your old ways.
I mean, I think it makes you a more trustworthy writer. I think it makes you an authority on more than just, high school sports. How did it change your writing to tell this story and truth about yourself?
What I did find about when I've written about fashion, when I've been open about it, when I've talked about it, I have talked about it, within the documentary, writing this article about GQ, about leather obsession, about leather fetish. And I also wrote about what did that imply sexually. I talked about my attraction towards sadomasochism. I talked about, the attraction of what they call, being a leather daddy, if that's what I wanted to be, or did I want to be a submissive, or did I have a fantasy of being a dominatrix? And I probably have all those things. What was gratifying about it was young individuals in their 20s got it. And they admired it, because of someone my age and reputation as a heterosexual writer. They admired that someone of my age would actually admit to things, talk about things, and not be ashamed of them. I am not ashamed of it. I am ashamed of hurting my wife, which was horrendous. I'm ashamed of hurting my son. I am not ashamed of anything that I've done in this journey of exploration, because I wonder to what degree do we really explore our desires?
Yeah.
Do we cut them off? Do we try them out and then say, all right, that's not for me? I believe we all have stuff. We all have things within us, but because of the taboo around it and the sense you can't talk about that, don't talk about a leather fetish. No one wants to know. It's no one's business. Don't talk about your
So
attraction to
many people want to know.
sadomasochism. But I think in talking about it, then we do start some sort of conversation.
Absolutely.
Desire is a great thing, but it's a complicated thing, and I think particularly in this country, we are really, really uptight about it and very,
agree.
very inward about it.
I agree, and I think, as I've said, it's causing a lot of pain. Have you gone back to the subject matter of in your journalism of sports and or
I've gone back.
politics,
I'm
or-
writing. The 2000. What was the last decade? 2010s? Is that what it was? Right.
Teen.
It's a bad decade. It was not a good decade for me. I don't think I didn't do a lot professionally. I was at a loss emotionally. I really turned on myself. So I stopped doing what I think I'm best at, which was basically very classical narrative nonfiction. I think that's what I was best at.
Do you think that having
And I have now returned to it.
Do you think that sort of knowing this about, I think you're an extraordinary interviewer, and I think you have an extraordinary talent to sort of ask people questions. Do you think that sort of knowing this about yourself, both all along and since sort of admitting it, it's made you, it's sort of inflected how you tell other people's stories?
I think it does to some degree. It makes you more empathetic, but that's sort of everyone says that. Fuck that. We're all empathetic. I get that. But it makes you more curious. It makes you more curious
You get
about
people
others.
to
It does make you more accepting
And do
of
you get
others.
people to get comfortable with admitting things?
Often it's by email, and it's still people won't give me their
Right.
names, but they've said, I really appreciate things you've written, things you said. I face the same dilemma. Can I really talk about this? Who can I really talk to this about? I still have a lot of fear. And I'm not talking about the awesome, incredible decision that Caitlyn Jenner had to make to become a transgender woman, given who she was. But it's just talking about desire. As I say, no one is getting hurt by this, but it is still very much
I think people are
a
getting
taboo.
hurt by it.
a taboo.
Yeah.
And I think what really hurts them is keeping it inside.
I think-
The fear of being stigmatized, the fear of being laughed at, which is enormous, the fear of being humiliated, which is something we really, really, really hate and revile and have tremendous fear of. And so, I'm talking about it today, not to be, a voyeur, not to titillate,
I think it's
but
awesome
because
that we get to talk about this.
it is good to talk about it. And if
Yeah.
anyone here is into S&M, see me afterwards.
No, just
We'll
ask us
we'll
a
see how we can
question.
do.
Do we have 10? Did you say 10 minutes? Do you want to have some questions? Or do
If
you want
if there are questions, of course. I think I've disturbed everyone so much that
I think you've opened everyone up.
I
so
think they
much.
just want to
this
get the hell out of here.
No. Turquoise shirt. Yeah.
Just wait one second. Buzz, if back when you were in Odessa and reporting your seminal work, you were as in touch and honest and at peace with yourself as you are now, would you have written the same book, have you gone back and looked at it even and said to myself, who was that guy, and if I were this guy now?
I think I would have written the same book because I'm interested in humans. I do have an empathy for humans. I try not to be. One of the great things about going to Odessa, besides the book, was it was going to a culture and people who are different from me. I'm very spoiled. I'm very entitled. I grew up in New York City in a life of privilege. I never went to a public school in my life. And what was fun about Odessa is people have different strengths all over the world and all over the country, and I was really attracted to that. The fact of the matter is, there was no way I could be that open. There was no way. The people of Odessa would have completely freaked out. And, you know, part of being a writer is being a chameleon and changing shape. Now, I do not try to hide myself, but, you know, I'm working on a book now that involves interviewing a lot of veterans in their 90s. And, you know, if I show up in thigh-high leather boots, they're going to have a fucking heart attack and die. And I don't want to be responsible for that. So there always is this question of how far I can go. So there was that restraint. But I have to say, at that age, it was in my mid-30s, I really had not discovered myself. I've been really, really good at burying it, of sublimating it, of not admitting to it. And I did that for 40 years, you know, since the age of 5, when those leather gloves became iconic. Until I finally said, I need to see what me is like. Now, even if I see it and I try it, well, then I find out at the very least it's not me. But I need to see what that me is.
Would it be all right if I asked a question? Megan Abbott discusses in a lot of her novels the idea that for young athletes of all genders and from very young ages, that so much attention is drawn to their bodies. I would like to ask, how do uniforms affect or contribute to this idea? And Leanne, as a young athlete, how do you feel this affected you personally, if it did at all?
Oh, sure it did. I mean, during Buzz's panel, it was about, you know, should we ban parents? I wore a bathing suit. Racing suits they were called paper suits. They were very, very small and thin. And I asked my dad and mom not to come to swim meets because I hated, my dad would videotape. I hated the scrutiny. I hated being that, you know, my body was developing. It was so awkward. I mean, uniforms, yeah. I mean, they uniformly display bodies and body types. And, you know, especially young women, and this happens in the dance world too. I mean, bodies can be sexualized so quickly. So, and women and girls are so aware of when they're being looked at and when they're being looked at in a healthy way and when they're being looked at in a not so great feeling way. It's just, you just know. And yeah, it can be uncomfortable to put on a uniform, but there's also that strength that comes, like I'm actually now incredibly comfortable in a bathing suit, and sort of probably more comfortable than I was when I was 13, because I did get a sort of a bodily self-confidence from being an athlete. But yeah, it's a funny, you know, everyone goes through puberty. Everyone like has these you know, this strange relationship to their bodies, and just because athletes have this prowess doesn't mean that they don't feel incredibly self-conscious about what they look like. And photography, and you know, I have an uneasy relationship to photography because of its presentation of an ideal rather than of a uniform image of what bodies should look like, rather than actually depicting the truth.
And, you know, I think to some degree the uniforms have also have reinforced gender stereotypes.
Yeah.
I think for gymnasts up to a degree, it was the pixie look.
Yeah.
You know, it's the pixie look with a ponytail. That's our image of gymnasts. They're little pixies, they're little angels, they're little this, they're little that. And let's face it, I think who finally broke the mold was Serena Williams. Serena Williams said, I love my body, I'm muscular, I'm strong, and I'm not going to fall. I'm not going to obey all this Wimbledon bullshit about wearing whites. I want to be able to express myself on the court while also wearing something. I mean, let's face it, they wear uniforms for a reason. It's to enable them to have the most skill possible. But I think what Serena did was great. I'm proud of it.
Yeah.
Now, you know as well as I do, she's an Amazon. She's this. I mean, the racism that was directed towards her for changing her look was withering. But to her credit, she said, I don't care.
But again, that courage is
yeah, and you know, she got a lot of grief.
Yeah.
But you know, right on. She's magnificent.
Yeah.
She's as magnificent as LeBron James. I mean, go for it, show it, and be comfortable. And I thought it was great. But, there has been that, women are a little bit more dainty, a little bit more this, a little bit more that. That's the role they play, and I think it's changing.
It's changing.
But-
God, it's changing. Yeah.
I think uniforms have reinforced the certain cultural image that we have of women athletes versus
Think of
men athletes.
when are figure skating, those outfits going to change? They're so bizarre.
They are bizarre.
Awful.
But Johnny Weir is kind of fun. I never quite know what the hell. I really want to know what he's going to. He's.
You know what I love are male gymnasts when they wear those trousers with the socks built in. They look like Smurfs, like Smurf.
But figure skaters, the pair skating, they do wear interesting uniforms. And they're beautiful to look at. They're really fun to look at. But, I was thinking, uniforms really have not changed that much, and why should they, in a sense, except in terms of gender and letting people express themselves. And this also that women are as skilled as men in every sport. That's why Simone Biles
yeah.
has been so great. She breaks every mold of, But behind closed doors, it's the same thing. She's an Amazon. She's too big. She's thunder thighs. She's this. She's that. And the way to get over it is through her incredible performance.
Yeah, and we haven't talked about this whole weekend, but the prevalence of eating disorders in sport is insane. Even though this is about health, this is about the human body, this is about but yeah, we should talk about
Particularly when
appetites.
I think women's gymnastics is
It's been
insane, and there've been a lot of cases of real physical danger, not sexual assault, physical danger posed to these young girls who literally, they feel their peak is from 16 to 19.
Yeah.
And I said this yesterday. Parents give them up. They give them up. They give them up at the ages of 8 or 9, and they're sent to Iowa, or they're sent to Houston, or they're sent to Texas. And I just think it's too much.
Question up top.
Hi, I've enjoyed this very much. During this whole seminar, the question of Serena Williams and what she has to pay for, whether or not it was a really good call. Someone said, she should have been banned from tennis for a year.
Right.
And we kept saying to each other, it's a combination of being really good at what she does. She's being black, being female, and being tough and angry. Mm-hmm. And it was like we never got all of those things
Right.
together to talk about.
And that's a great point, because I think what you're really saying, she did not fit the mold that we have of the typical female tennis player. She's black, she's really strong, she's very muscular, she's angry, she's proud of herself. It's not this sort of, I'm blanking on the word, but she's not subservient. She didn't fit the mold. And let's face it, there was a ton of racism directed. They didn't like her, and they particularly didn't like her father, who was very controlling, but really was smart with these kids. And I've interviewed Serena. First of all, she's cool as hell. I've interviewed her home in Vanity Fair. She has a really good sense of humor. She's a lot of fun. She's very, very, very wry. But, she got a lot of shit for a lot of years for the reasons that you're saying. And to her credit, I'm not, I'm going to express myself by winning, and I'm going to express myself by not caving and not conforming. So of any athlete, I'm the most excited to see what she's going to wear, because it's fun.
Yeah,
It's fun.
She has established a new role, a new model for how to be an athlete, how to both be angry and classy at the same time.
Yeah, she's very classy.
Yeah.
She'll have outbursts, and I forget who
And
she challenged that point, and she got very angry.
the lines woman, yeah.
And then she was very, I thought, conciliatory afterwards to her opponent. But she's great. She's fantastic. I just wanted to win one more major so she can break the record. She's fantastic. She's great.
Time. Thanks.
All right, well,
Buzz.
thank you. Thank you.